Hola, Norteamericanos y amigos. Greg Patten, host of a Daily Spit Take. And this is going to be back-to-back game reviews that I have just played that I wanted to give you my initial thoughts on. Wanted to put some time into both these games. So the first game we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about Avowed. Now, if you purchased the premium edition, you were able to play it 5 days earlier. The feedback's been pretty good. Like, if you're a fan of the Pillars of Eternity series, I think you're pretty pleased with what you've played. I'll get to that in this review. First off, what I want to talk about out of the gate. I think Avowed is one of the better looking games on the Xbox Series consoles that I've seen. I think they did a very good job making something that's reminiscent of what they did with the Outer Worlds, of having all of this color, having all of these locales. It is not a true open world game. I know that they're going to say it's an open world game, but the way you can always test that is once you reach port in the first major area in the game, I tried to swim to the islands that were on the map. And once I got to the rocks of the cliffs of those islands, invisible walls. There was one where I was able to force myself over the wall, and I was able to just kind of swim in like a cove, but that was about it. There was no actual quest. There was no actual any interest. It was just an open water area that I found myself able to get in. And then once I came back to the surface, I was no longer even in the cove because the game had transported me over the rocks back out. That can be a good and bad thing when you're making these kind of games, because since it is like big level based open areas, they're not exactly true open world, but that doesn't take away from the experience if you're enjoying it. I think Avowed does a very good job with its combat. I think story-wise, we got to get into this from the standpoint of it has a similar plot to what Baldur's Gate had, with like the brain worm, the parasite in your brain is causing you to do things. It's giving you special. You're able to hear voices in a spiritual realm, kind of like the astral plane, of you hear voices coming from a distant area that they are trying to speak in riddles, and they are trying to lead the player on their quest of what do they want them to accomplish. I think that it's doing fine with that. The problem with the story seems to be, and I mean no put down when I say this about Obsidian, I think Fallout New Vegas is one of the best written games of all time. I think they did a great job with the Outer Worlds, especially the early part of that game. I think the DLC that they did for the Outer Worlds was pretty well written and had some really interesting choices and consequences, especially the detective one. But what I really think hurts this game to be a very slow start for certain players, and it concerns me for the health of this game, is there is so much Pillars of Eternity lore in this that every single conversation with anybody outside of your early companions has to do with what's happened in a Pillars of Eternity game. And I, unfortunately, have never put the time in and played Pillars of Eternity. I think people who are very well versed on Pillars of Eternity have put their reviews out, and they really like the game. And I like the game as well. I think the 5 or 6 hours I've put in, I've really enjoyed what I've played. But I have a running joke that when I play Diablo with my wife, where Diablo, the story can be sometimes not that important. You know why you're playing Diablo. You're out there for the loot. You're playing with somebody to enjoy the co-op. So I will always, when I see characters that have ridiculous lore names, I start making fun of it. And Avowed has given me every opportunity to do that. The goo goo gaga types are all over this game, in terms of they will start talking about where you are from in the game. For instance, Thornburg comes up a lot because I picked a class that basically has like a noble heritage, but I also picked somebody who had a spiritual heritage because I wanted to kind of have that bridge to be able to communicate with the voices that my character is hearing versus just telling them to go away. because that's a lot of the dialogue options when it comes to the voices, or just go away, leave me alone, I don't want to help you. So because I'm meditating with the voices, I get a lot of interesting responses when people start questioning the plague, the root, whatever you want to call it, that is causing this world problems, where the animals are going crazy and the locals are going crazy. But the problem can be is they talk at length about stuff I have no idea what's going on. And then when you introduce a character like the Watcher, which sounds so cool, and then you put up 8 different dialogue options to discuss the history of the Watcher and the origins of the name and where did this person come from, and it all ties into Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. When I click on the glossary, if they didn't give me the glossary, I'd have no idea who these people are they're talking about. They'd have no idea. Currently, my build that I'm going for is I'm going for a mage with like guns, because I thought it was a difference to see kind of the musket, to see if you have a Gridmore book, you just basically have the spells that you need. You have fire, ice, you have lightning, you have defense spells. You can add poison spells. You can add more defensive spells. It doesn't really have healing spells that I've found so far in the first 6 hours I've played. I don't think they're on the tree when I've looked. I've kind of been going in the Ranger tree because it has a lot of the steady aim. It has a lot more of the do damage with the pistol while I'm doing spells. And I really like the feel of the game from that standpoint. I think it's my favorite thing is that I have all of the buttons in front of me. When I'm holding down the left trigger, I can see like all of my spells and they're all corresponding to a button. It's very PC-like in that sense. And I think playing it on the Series X, I think the game's run great. Again, I heard people making jokes about the $22 of that they got a day one patch after the game officially came out yesterday. And people were like, well, that means we didn't get to experience it with the patch. And I'm like, well, now that's just like reviewers who are playing games 2 weeks, maybe a month in advance, who don't have the day one patches, and they're basing their reviews off this. I think Avowed's a very good game. I think it's a flawed game in the sense of it's not a true open world game as it's selling itself. And I think if you like the Outer Worlds, I think you'll like Avowed. I think the dialogue, although expansive and very diverse, I think it's a much better choice to go down that road than Fallout 4 and Starfield, which feel very limited in what they're doing with their storytelling. I don't think it's as good as Fallout New Vegas in terms of like the choices and dialogue and the speech checks. I don't think it's doing that. I'm only 5-6 hours into the game, so I can't really say for sure that I think that this game is going to be a game I'm going to remember at the end of the year. I like Obsidian. I'm glad that Outer Worlds 2 will probably come out this year. They'll have 2 games out. You'll be able to compare and contrast those. But I think for what they wanted to do with the Pillars of Eternity franchise, they wanted to take a shot at a smaller, epic fantasy story. I think what I've played, I've enjoyed. I think the upgrade system's great. I haven't run into a position where I'm lacking too many materials. And if I had all of the materials that I would need, I think that would work out really badly from the standpoint of you would just be way too overpowered. But I also think that I haven't found enough rare stuff early in the game. I've found 2 weapons that they would consider special. And I think that the towns are so big, these main areas that I've been in, that when I get into the wilderness, it's almost like enemy around every corner. There's no room to let it breathe from the standpoint, because if you're in the town, usually people aren't attacking you. I have run into a couple situations where I broke into some places and people reacted to it, so I had to take them out. I like to play my first playthrough. I always like to play as the bad guy. I know that's not very popular, but the reason I do that is it's the Fallout 3 way I learned to play RPGs. It's like when I played Mass Effect, I played Renegade first because I want to see how far will the game let me go. I want to see if I'm able to make my companions mad enough that they'll just leave. And so far, Avowed in the first 6 hours has not really given me that opportunity. I've done one thing that probably would be questionable that involves beating a boss in a cavern and then carrying out exactly what the boss was trying to do just to see what would happen. I think the companion reaction was pretty much they have no idea why I did it. And so as the player, I have no idea why I did it. I think Avowed has a lot of potential. I think I'm going to play more of it. I think if you have Game Pass, you should give it a chance. I think it is a full price product. I think that if you like Pillars of Eternity, if you like Obsidian games, I think you should give it a chance, but I would also caution I'd kind of wait on a sale. If you don't want to do Game Pass, say you're on the core Game Pass and you're not able to play this yet, I would wait. I do think if you're on PlayStation, I think there's a very good chance that this is a game that it feels at home on Xbox, I guess, just because of the whole studio thing. But if you're on PlayStation, you want to give it a shot, I think you should as well. I need to play more of it before I'll have like a more definitive opinion on that. But I think what I've played, I like the combat. And the reason I like the combat is I like the quick change. If you hold a button down, you can swap weapons really quick. If you like spells, you've got that available. I thought playing with the bow felt pretty good, and especially unlocking a couple of the steady bow points that I used for the guns and the bow. I thought it played pretty solid in terms of like my aim. It does have the auto aim. You can turn that off if you want. I think the enemies aren't too tough. I think when you run into the wrong camp and you see the skulls, and they do a good job when they hand out quests, if they put 1 skull, 2 skulls, if you're like early in the game, say maybe not attack this side quest just yet or this treasure hunt, maybe wait. I do like the treasure maps. I think it's always fun to give you the ability to explore. And what I really think this game shocked me was the verticality. I did not expect I was going to be climbing buildings and running and jumping, but it's a very fluid motion. I think they got that right. I think Outer Worlds had a similar fluidity to movement towards the end of the game when you got your perks. But I feel like this one right out of the gate I think they did a great job. They could have done the thing where they included the perks and the verticality, but they didn't. They let you just kind of jump and run and go over. And I'm just like going through roofs all the time. Like I'm trying to go through the roof, seeing what I can find. And I think it's just a lot of fun in that sense. I just think that the characters, I was very excited to have Kai in my party since it was the voice actor for Garrus, being a Mass Effect fan, and I haven't heard that voice in a long time. Kai's probably going to go with me the whole way because he seems pretty down to earth. And the thing I really like, he doesn't know all the lore. So when they start lore dumping on me, he has the same reaction. And I kind of feel like if I get a character who knows way too much lore, I'm going to kick him out of the party because I don't want as much lore sometimes as this game's trying to give me. And who knows, maybe 30 hours later, I'll know all there is to know about Pillars of Eternity and I'll decide it's something that I want to start playing. But as of right now, I think that it's a pretty cool universe that they've done a good job explaining, but not a great job. Because a great job would mean that I would understand more of the conversations without having played those games. You got to click on the X button, hit the glossary every so often. Okay, what is this term? What's a claviger? What is that? Like, okay, it's an officer of some type. What's a watcher? Okay, cool. Then you just move on, and then they throw in the names, and it's like, well, who is Odin? And you're like, not Odin of the Greek gods. It's like Odin of Pillars of Deadfire 2. They're a death guard, and they died, and they were resurrected, and all. And you're just like, whoa, okay, that's a lot. And then there are 7 other questions I can ask somebody about that. And I guess the mistake this game has made is, yes, you can read a bunch of books. Yes, you can pull them off the shelves. Yes, you can find all the lore. You can cook your food. You can upgrade your weapons. I think all that stuff's fine. I think the problem is that you don't have a very good sense of where things are, even early on when you would actually... I'm not advocating for the Ubisoft markers. What I am advocating for is if I talk to a character, I would rather them tell me where things are located than talk to me about where they came from 7 different ways and talk about the same place that I come from, and I have no idea what they're talking about. I would much rather be like, where can I go and get bounties? Where can I go to do this? And the game doesn't really give you a lot of that. It kind of just throws you in, and it's hard to tell sometimes who can you talk to and who can you not talk to. Everybody has talking bubbles above their head, so it sometimes feels like you either pass somebody, and then other times it's 3 people standing around a circle. You figure, oh, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to help them solve this problem, and you have nothing to do with it. You have absolutely nothing to do with it. They're just arguing about something, about somebody gambling, somebody lost their ship, something of that nature. And meanwhile, the person who's up against the wall, like, okay, that person's probably a quest giver. They have nothing to say. They're just like, move on. I think there are political undertones in it of how they're trying to set the world by certain groups are welcomed versus others. And I'm learning all that stuff, so I can't really go too much into that. I think the sword and board combat felt fine. I know people sometimes love the first person sword and board combat of like Skyrim. I think it's fine. You can go third person. The only difference is just like performance or quality, you have to make the change on the menu screen. You can't change mid-game. I guess it's just to keep the game moving without any issues. But that's kind of where I stand with Avowed. I feel like if you have Game Pass, you have no excuse not to try it if you're on the Ultimate Edition. I think if you like RPGs, I think you should give it a shot. And I think I'm going to continue to keep playing it, so I'll have more to say about it, and I'll probably even have a full review later. But this is the first of the reviews. So this one is Avowed. I think that this game has tremendous potential. I think that Obsidian are not going to give up on this game, even if it doesn't have the critical reception that so many were hoping for. I think that it's a good first major release from Xbox Studios this year. I think they're off to a good start. We'll see with South of Midnight and the 33rd Expedition. But that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Daily Spit Take. Like I said, give Avowed a chance if you have Game Pass. Otherwise, you could probably wait for a sale. I will talk to you shortly about Lost Records, Bloom and Rage Tape 1. I've put some time into that. But until then, we will talk again shortly. This has been the Daily Spit Take. I've been your host, Greg Patten. And as always, I'd like to dedicate this episode to my mom who's recovering from stage 3 lung cancer. And we will talk again shortly. Keep your vibration high and take care.